So we're looking at the Google development environment for Android mobile phones using the Eclipse developer environment. We're taking a look at how we can send text messages via SMS from one mobile phone to another. And in this example, we've set up two different emulators. We have one emulator running the Honeycomb Level 12 API, and in another window we have the Level 4 API. So what we're going to do is to send a text message from the level 4 over to the level 12, and for telephone numbers we're going to use port numbers. So 5556 is the telephone number here, 5554 is the telephone number here. So we'll open up the messaging system and compose a new message. Remember the port number, TCP/IP port number here is 5556. That's what we're going to use for testing. So 5556 and the message. So we'll send this, and there may be or may not be some latency. There's the message, hello world, and there's the number that it came from. So this is one way to test the SMS text messaging in the phone. Another way, in addition to setting up two different phones under the Android Virtual Device Manager and then launching each of these, another way to do this is to use the emulator control that we also use for GPS testing. But here what we can do is to set up a telephone number and use that to test this. So remember that we're using two emulators, and let's say that we want to send to this 5554 telephone. We could type that in, send an SMS message here. Hit send, and on the phone here there's that message right across the top of the screen. So there are a number of different ways that we can test the functionality of sending text messages and making sure that they arrive at a particular development phone. So in this next step, what we're going to do is to take a look at how we can build from scratch an application that will gather input from the user and then send a text message to a phone. And in this case, we're going to use the phone number of the TCP/IP port so that we can send a text message to one of these emulators. So now let's take a look at how we can build this project from scratch that will send an SMS text message. So from the File menu, we'll choose New, Project, Android Project, and we'll type in a project name. So just like under Microsoft Visual Studio, we'll have a project name, but all the other questions are things that we don't see under Microsoft Visual Studio. So we'll go through them a little bit in greater detail. So app dev, Android, SMS text message, and then we'll tack on project, the API level 4 for Google. So we're making this compatible to run on anything all the way back to the Droid 1, the Android API plus the Google API, app dev, Android text messaging, and we'll add application. So for the package name, we'll put com.appdev, so that's our website backwards, and then the name of what we're building. And we can skip the last step and hit finish. Here we go, text messaging. So there's the Java file. Here's the user interface file. And we'll change the string. And we'll test this out. So we want to know if the template builds correctly. So we need to set up a run configuration. So Eclipse is capable of employing a number of different development environments. So we could deploy Java applets, Java enterprise applications, and here we're building a mobile phone app for Android. So we'll say something like this. So app dev Android SMS text messaging, run configuration. And we'll launch this manually. So that looks good. We can see the 3 asterisks that we added ourselves. And we'll make an app that allows the user to type in a message and also type in a mobile phone number. Perhaps other applications might even interact with the contact list and let the user pick from a name from the contact list. But to keep this simple, we'll set up a text box that has a phone number and a text box for the SMS message. So let's start by modifying the content here of main.xml. Here's the preview of that window. Let's start by setting up each attribute on a separate line. And also, let's go ahead and set up the background color. So the opacity will be solid and all white. So that looks good. So here's our application with the white background. And what we want to do next is to set up the input fields for the phone number to send the text message to, and the message itself. So from the graphical layout window, we can see the preview here, and also we can drag and drop components from the widgets, the fields, the layouts. So text fields, we can grab one of those. So here's our edit text 1, and we need a second one as well. So we have an edit text to collect the value of the phone number. We have an edit text also to collect the value of the message. And to make this structurally organized, we bring in a table layout. And we'll set the values here for the width and the height. So we have a table layout, and remember that just like under HTML, a table has rows. So here's our first row. The only difference is that under HTML we would have a column, a TD tag, and that's not necessary here with the Android markup. And we could take the couple of things. First of all, the edit text, as well as we could copy and tweak the text view here. So this Android markup language looks and feels a whole lot like building a web page, but we're building a mobile phone user interface. So we have a text view, and we could set that to wrap the content. Also the margin here, we'll set that to 5 dip, so density independent pixels. Monitors are 72 dots per inch, and most phones are at least 160, so we'll let the dip calculator figure out how to make 5 look good. So the edit text here, it's missing a closing tag. And let's double check that we don't have a lingering edit text sitting around somewhere. So that looks pretty good. Now basically this edit text is going to need the same table. So we have 1 table layout, 2 table rows, and we can just take this out and put it right here. And so that looks pretty good. So let's back up and take a look at what we just typed in and what we just built. So linear layout, that's the default root node, the root template node of all Android markup language mobile phone screens. We have a text view, that's the default template. It's just the message that comes from strings.xml. We have a table layout. We have a table row. We have a text view. So the purpose of the text view is just to provide a label. We could call it hello 1. Other one we can call it hello 2. We could give it a different label. We call it the number and the text message. But for right now, we'll just call it hello 1 and hello 2. So those need to be defined. So under values, we have strings, and by default, we get this hello. And we'll change that. So we could say 1 and 2 correlate to something. So label number 1 is the number, and label number 2 is the message. So theoretically, we have a user interface with a white background. We have a text view that says what is the number. We have another text view that says what is the message. And let's try this out and see what happens. So we've saved the work. Let's go ahead and run this. And that looks pretty good. So SMS text number, SMS text message. So the number that we're going to send is this telephone number right here, 5556. And the message that we might want to type is something like hello honeycomb, API level 12. So that's good content. And now we're missing a big button at the bottom that will read in this content and then send this out as a SMS text message. And that'll be the next step that we take a look at. So first of all, we're going to need a button. And if we don't remember how to spell a button, we could go to the form widgets, look for something like this. And the tag here is button, so under HTML it would have been input type equals button. Here it's just the tag name is button. So we use this button to send the SMS text message, and we're going to set up a button ID. And the reason for this is that depending on what version of the Android API that we're using, if we're using Honeycomb, for example, there's a shortcut to bind the event, click event. We could say Android on click, and Honeycomb would know what to do with that. Gingerbread would know what to do with that. But if we go back into the earlier versions, older phones wouldn't know what to do. It just doesn't compile down to that platform. So what we could do is, just to make it work on all phones, we'll set up an ID for the button. And using this ID over in the Java side, we'll write some code that basically, instead of one line of code here, we're going to spend 2 lines of code over in Java. That will hook the button click up from this button over into our class file. So we'll just call this B1 underscore XML. And the width, we'll make it really big. Let's stop and test that. So here's our really big button, and we want to hook it up to the code in Java. So to make that work, in the Project Explorer window, we're going to open up the Java file. So Android, AppDev Android, SMS Text Messaging activity. Remember that this is like in Visual Studio a form, but we call it an activity. And we want to make this handle the button click. So what this needs is to implement an interface. And we'll import what is the definition of that. OnClickListener.view.view.android. Next, if we're going to implement this interface, then we better have the necessary functions, so we get a warning to add them, and it's just the single on-click event. Parameter that comes in is the handle to the button, but we don't really need to do anything with that. But we'll send a log file entry that just says on click for debugging purposes. And that looks good. So before we write any SMS text messaging code, the first thing that we should do is to test the event binding for the button. So we have a button click event. We're implementing the interface, but still we need to add more code. So whether or not we set up the event binding using the markup language in the new platform, or whether we write this code that manually binds it, we still have to write the same number of lines of code inside the on-click handler. This is the difference between event binding and markup versus event binding in Java. It looks something like this. We get a handle to the button, and we'll just call it B1 Java, and we'll set it equal to something. So button, we'll import that definition, so button.widget.android, and we'll call in this magic function called this.find view by ID, r.id dot, and there's the button in XML. So once we have that, we'll set the on-click listener to this function, and what that does is say, look in this class here. When the on-click event happens on the button, expect that this class has a function named on-click. So let's save all files. We'll hit run. We'll click this 3 times and go to the log file, and hopefully, there we go, 1, 2, 3. So we have the correct event binding on the button. We have the user interface. We have the edit text for the text, the number of the phone that we're going to call. We have a edit text for the message that we're going to send. So the next step in this example is to write code inside the onClick event between the begin and the end that sends out that message. So an edit text is what holds the content on the user interface. So let's bring in the definition of an edit text. And we'll use the magic function again, this.find r.id. In the XML side, we'll find that button. And we'll find the next one. So we have pointer number 1 and pointer number 2, and we can happily use that to set up the SMS text message. So now, how do we grab a handle to the operating system, the Android operating system, to send this message? So we'll bring in the definition of SMS Manager. Here we go, SMS Manager.telephony.android. And we'll set that equal to something. We'll get the default SMS Manager for the operating system. And we'll go ahead and send out our messages. So the message that we're going to send, we're going to send a text message. And we've got a couple of parameters to work with here. So the address and the text are really the destination address and the text are really the ones that we're going to focus our attention on. These are not all required values. So the first item of business is the phone number of the phone, and since we're using the emulators, we could type in 5556 hard-coded, but what we're really looking for is what is the user typing in. So let's copy this. And we want to know what is the text, and then we'll get the read-only version of that. And then this other alternate address thing, we'll put null. We're not going to need that. And we don't need these other optional features as well. So we have an onClick event. We're sending out begin and end to the log file. We're grabbing 2 mirrors to the edit text in the Java side. So the on the Android markup language side, we want to just go over there, grab them, get a pointer to that, and mirror that. We have the SMS Manager object, and we're asking to send a text message to this phone number and this message. So let's try this out. It might work the first time, like the last example. It might not, and we'll have to debug it. So we'll hit go. We'll send to 5556, and we'll type in this message. And we'll click the button. So there is a bug. We'll have to fix that bug. Message says, sorry, the app stopped unexpectedly. So if we look at the message that we get, so the message here says that the permissions have not been granted by the user of this phone to send SMS text messages. So although the code may or may not be correct here, it probably is correct. The problem is that just like we grant permissions to use the GPS receiver or internet access, the app has to ask the user for permission also for SMS, sending us SMS messages. So that'll be what we fix next. So under the project folder, we have the Android manifest XML, and we want to add a permission. So right under this uses SDK, we're going to do another one that says uses permission. And since this is probably not something we want to memorize, we can copy and paste it from a resource on the internet, on the Android dictionary or reference lookup, or one of the other blogs. That would work just as well also. Okay, so let's take a look then at how we can set this permission for sending SMS. We'll type uses permission. The name of the permission is Android dot permission dot. And let's back up here. The fact that the IntelliSense didn't auto magically turn on means that we also need to add this. So S for send. There we go, send SMS. So hopefully that's the only permission that we're missing here. And let's watch what happens. So here's the app. Here's the honeycomb in the top. Here's our message. And we'll try this out. And that's it. So we see the message, hello honeycomb, and that looked good. So the contrast here on the honeycomb default emulator is a little bit white on silver, but the message did come in, and so we could see that as well right there. If I hold the mouse down and highlight this, we can see the messages that have gone through the honeycomb emulator. So that's it. So that wraps up basically the process of sending SMS text messages from one emulator to another. We use the TCP/IP port number in place of telephone numbers during the programming and debugging process, and everything worked out just fine. Also remember that the permission that we needed to set was this permission right here called Android.permission.send SMS.